everyone, and welcome to the House of Shiloh Ministries. We are here tonight to continue in part 2 of Debunking the Sunday Resurrection, sponsored by the House of Shiloh Ministries and created by Minister Yakanina, Prophetess Yamuna, and Brother Andrew. We finished, let's go to the next slide so we can talk more about it. We discussed when did Yahusha die, and we talked about, meaning when he died day-wise on the Passover, and then we talked about the time, which was the third hour, which was the time he was crucified. Okay? So we talked about the day he was crucified on, and we talked about the time he was crucified, and we ended this slide from part 1 here, where we have this diagram of a 12-hour clock, where the first hour begins at 6 a.m. That's how they count it. And you go 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9 is third hour. All right? And I say this is the daylight portion because you have this count for daylight time and you have this count for the night section or the evening section, right? Which would be 6 p.m. Okay? So that's where we ended. We already understand now that it was Passover, that all of this occurred, and that it was the third hour, which was approximately 9 o'clock. Okay? Now, we're going to get into further detail just to show you that Scripture supports this. We're going to just read Matthew 27:45. Before we do that, we need to understand why the timing of Yahusha's death is important to us to understand. Because it provides the beginning stamp of the 3 days and 3 nights. Knowing when Yahusha died and knowing when Yahusha resurrected gives you the beginning and the end of the 72 hours, the 3 days, right? 3 full days and night. Since we know he died, we know that he was crucified. Now we got to move with the rest of the timeline, right? To get to the point of where he died. And Matthew 27:45 through 50 will get us started there. Or pretty much put the whole window in one set of verses. Brother, would you mind being my first, please, tonight?
No problem. Sir. Why is the timing of Yahusha's death important? It provides a beginning window of the 3 days and 3 nights in the sepulcher. This time will be used to prove Yahusha was in the sepulcher 3 days and 3 nights. Matthew 27:45 to 50. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Yahusha cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, I don't know how to read that one. Lama. Okay. Thank you, Minister. That is to say, my owl, why hast thou forsaken me? Some of them that stood there when they heard, said, this man called it for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. The rest said, let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Yahusha, when he cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost.
All right. Thank you, brother. So from the 6th hour to the 9th hour, there was darkness in the land. Now, we've talked about the counting already in the previous lesson. So what time would that be? That'll be 12 noon till about 3 p.m. Okay, approximately in the 9th hour, Yahusha died. And this is read again in Mark 15. Brother, read this one for me as well. 15:33 through 37.
And when the 6th hour was come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. At the 9th hour, Yahusha cried with a loud voice, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Yeah, I can't understand that. I can't read that, sorry. Which is being interpreted, my, why hast thou forsaken me? And some of them that stood by when they heard it said, Behold, he calleth Elias. And one ran and filled a sponge full of vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink, saying, Let alone, let us whether Elias will come to take him down. And he should cry with a loud voice and give up the ghost.
Okay, thank you, brother. Sorry for the miss on that when I got it at the bottom, but I didn't get it in the center. I'll make sure I correct that. But again, here Mark says the same thing that the book of Matthew says. Yahusha died approximately in the 9th hour. So let me move you to the next window, the slide, so we can just see another diagram of how this looks to help the audience see and understand. So again, he was arrested. Remember, these days start in the evening. So he sits and meets with his disciples in the evening. They prep for the meal, and he sits down and eats dinner, right? After he eats dinner and tells Judas, whoever dips his hand in this cup, and tells Peter, you're going to deny me, he goes out and prays. Takes a few of them, goes and prays, right? While he's praying, Judas betrays him with a kiss and gets arrested. This is all happening during Passover night. So Yahusha never went to sleep. He never laid his head down again. Once he had his meal and once he prayed, he was arrested that night. And they went fast forward with his conviction. So in the 6th hour, so all of that happened at night. So during the 6th hour, when morning was finally about to begin for the Passover, the daylight portion of Passover, he gets crucified at 9 a.m. the same night, same day he was arrested. He stayed from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And from the 6th hour to the 9th hour, you see the 6 hours at the top, which is noon. That's when the darkness fell, right? And between the 6th and 9th hour, that occurred. And by the 9th hour was the time of Yahusha's death.
Mm-hmm.
Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions or any adds?
Can you go back to that scripture that you just read? Yes. I wanted to point out something because when you read it, it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to start where it says, and some of them that stood by, when they heard it, said, Behold, he calleth Elias. Yeah. And then one ran and filled a sponge full of vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. So what would make them think he was asking for something to drink if he's calling on Elias? You can find out what it is he's asking for in the book of John. It's in John 19:27. Then said he to the disciples, Behold, no, not that one. I'm sorry, John 19:28, verse 28. After this, Yahusha, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, he said, I thirst. So this is where the drink comes in at. And they gave him bitter drinks, bitter liquid, or bitter solution. So he had a bitter cup to drink. This is where the vinegar comes in the sponge of vinegar. I just wanted to add that piece in there so to give it some clarification.
Oh, thank you, Minister. I appreciate that. Very well. Very good. Very good. There's some little tasty cookies Minister puts in your lap. Anybody else?
And one thing is, I think
Brother Gianni, does he sound low to you all?
Yes. Yes, he does.
Yes.
Yeah.
can you hear me?
There's an echo now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I was saying, one thing about it, another thing too. Acidic makes your dehydration worse. So if you're giving someone a beverage like that, not only is it not going to replenish you, but it's going to make you thirst even more for a drink.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it wouldn't have helped him at all. I can only imagine how strong that taste would have been if it was just that, vinegar on a sponge. That would have been some strong tasting stuff. All right. So let me go back to the previous slide. So we've talked about the timing of his crucifixion, how long he was crucified. That's a long 6 rough hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. I can only imagine. Now we're going to continue so we can discuss more on when he was actually placed in the sepulchres, because that's the next process. So we've talked about the Passover, the day of the big day of everything, right? The crucifixion, death, and getting into the sepulchre. So we've talked about the Passover, the day, the big day, the time of the crucifixion, how long he was crucified, and we've talked about when he died. Now we need to know when he was put in the sepulchre. And never forget, when he was put in the sepulchre was this window, because what was his promise? His sign he gave. We will talk about that. All right, who wants to read this piece for me?
I'll read it.
Please do so.
And now when the even was come, because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor, which also waited for the kingdom of Elohim, came and went in boldly unto Pilate and craved the body of Yahusha.
All right, thank you, brother. This is a very popular verse. This is the verse that the church uses to say, see, the evening has come and he's dead. He died on Friday because this is the preparation day. And they still count, and like we talked about earlier, they use the decision the Catholic Church created centuries ago, stating they counted partial days as wholes, because they said that was by the Jewish reckoning. I didn't realize that the word uses approximations.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they were saying was being done, though, right? So when you look at the word the even, it's opsios, and it means late, either 3 to 6 p.m. So then you could say something now when it was in the evening, between 3 and 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the timeline, that makes sense. Yahusha died at 3. So Joseph, being a righteous man and knowing that this is the preparation day, and the next day is a Shabbat, doesn't want to don't want to be disobedient, having the body of the Messiah on the cross. But the problem we have is that the church doesn't recognize which Shabbat this is. Even though the scripture says it, they do not recognize it. And he says it right here in John 19:31. This was not a regular Shabbat. It says, the Yahudim, therefore, because it was the preparation, that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Shabbat day. For that Shabbat day was a high day. He sought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken down. You break somebody's legs, even if they're alive, you take them down, they can't run, they can't get up, they can't go, and they'll just slowly die, but at least they won't be on the cross or on the tree. So this was not the weekly Sabbath. It couldn't have been, because this was a high Sabbath. And we know this is a high Sabbath. Why? Because Passover. It's there. It's right there in your face. What the church will say, this is a Friday. And then they said in their literature that it was a double Shabbat. It was a double Shabbat, meaning that the feast Shabbat and the weekly Shabbat fell on the same day. But that can't be the case either if we know how to count. And we'll talk about that in a second.
Brother?
So by this default, give me 1 second, sister. I'll let you ask. By the default, think about this. Since we know this is the weekly Shabbat, the high feast Shabbat, that means the Passover could not have been Friday, all right? Because it wasn't the preparation day for the weekly, it was a preparation day for the high Sabbath. By default, he could not have died on Friday then. You understand that? Does that make sense to all of you? It's important to understand that. Because he died on Passover and was buried on the preparation day Passover, and you knew the next day was a high feast day, and they do not run the same days, and we're going to prove that in a minute. We know by default he did not die on Friday. All right? He was not buried or put in the sepulcher on Friday. I keep saying die. I apologize. He was not put in the sepulcher on Friday. All right. Sister Sarah.
Yes, I wanted to just say that as far as the church is concerned, they don't even take and consider the Sabbath. So it wouldn't, this is why they feel like it was on Friday, because they don't even acknowledge the Sabbath. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am, I do. They don't. They don't acknowledge any of it. I was told today by the young lady at work that when I asked her if you sin, what sin is, she told me what it was. And I said, do you obey the law? She goes, no. And I said, why? Well, there's an understanding and, for forgiveness and all that. And I said, we have grace for that, but do you keep the commandments? She goes, well, no, not all, but I do my best. I said, okay, well, let's talk about the commandments then. I said, do you keep the Sabbath? She said, no. I said, why? Well, we're told that it don't have to be the same way. These are different times. Where's that in the Bible? Who says that? This is the 2819 church, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Twisting the meaning of what the scripture said. When it says, in the end, all men will bow down and worship on the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. In the end. But yet you don't have to keep it now. You can just pick a day. Don't make sense. Anybody else?
And we take what they say instead of reading it for ourselves.
Right.
But it's right there in front of us. All we have to do is just read and not accept what people tell us. We've done that forever.
All for centuries. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting to a point with this young lady that I'm going to tell her, you don't want to know. That's why you're wasting my time. You don't want to know, because if you really wanted to know, you would have made the attempt to sit down with me. Why is it I told her that I've been a Christian 40 plus years and now suddenly I'm not? What would make a man as devoted as I was to Christianity say I was wrong?
Brother, can I say something?
Yes, sir.
To back up what Sarah said, if you look at Hosea 4 and 6, it's my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. That's what's going on with the Christian church. that also goes back to the four words that are not in the Bible. I feel and I think. They cherry pick and they pick out what they feel will accommodate their life and what they are in. And then they modify it to feel, well, I think it means this, instead of digging at the truth. If you have a lack of knowledge and you don't search after the truth, you're going to stay in a lack of knowledge because you keep taking what said, what Western theology and Catholicism has given you. And if you keep doing that, you'll be stagnant. It's called stagnation. And you'll stall out, and then you'll be constantly looking to the left or right, and that is a deviation from the path. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else? All right. So let's continue. We're going to continue to look at this time window, okay? Who would like to read next?
I will.
I'm going to pick Minister White.
Okay.
So that's who I heard. I'm sorry.
And Pilate marveled if he were already dead. And calling unto him the centurion, he asked him whether he had been any while dead. And when he knew it of the centurion, he gave the body to Joseph. And he bought fine linen, and took him down, and wrapped him in the linen, and laid him in a sepulchre which was hewn out of a rock, and rolled a stone unto the door of the sepulchre. And Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph beheld where he was laid.
All right. Thank you, Minister. So, Joseph, a righteous man, knew he needed to get Yahusha's body. So before Passover was complete, he hurried up and did it because this was the preparation day for the High Shabbat. And he placed his body in a sepulcher before sunset. Notice these verses that we've talked about so far. They all, who loved Yahusha, still kept the Sabbath even after he died. Church. The church tells us his death and resurrection fulfilled the law, so we don't have to keep it. If that's the case, then why keep the Sabbath when he died? And by the way, we'll talk a little more about that when he resurrects. All right, so let's look at this time window in another diagram. You notice I've built on to the same diagram so we can fill the whole second half of Passover out. So he was crucified 9 a.m., suffered for 6 long hours and died at 3 p.m. 3 p.m. the 9th hour. And between the 12 noon, the 6th hour, and 3 p.m. the 9th hour was that darkness. And Joseph went to Pilate to get the body before 6 p.m. because he wanted to get him off the tree before the High Shabbat began out of obedience to Torah. Now, remember this point. This is the starting point of the 72 hours when he got placed in the sepulcher during this window. All right? That's why it's important to know when Yahusha died. All right, any questions? And when he was placed in the sepulcher. Okay, let's continue. In summary, then, Yahusha was crucified approximately 9 a.m., which is the 3rd hour. Died approximately 3 p.m., the 9th hour. Was placed in the sepulcher between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. before sunset, which would have began the High Sabbath. And all occurred on Passover, the preparation day of the High Shabbat, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Thus, we know that Yahusha could not have died Friday, the preparation day of the weekly Shabbat. They would have said it. They would not have said High Shabbat. And the high Shabbat is not the same as the weekly. It's never been. And we'll prove that it couldn't have been the weekly because there were some days that passed afterwards, right? We'll prove it. So now, here comes the big piece of this. We needed all that to finally start talking about what we're going to talk about now. To finally put the full picture together, we must now understand when Yahusha resurrected. Remember, we must keep the things in mind, what we got here. Yahusha says his sign is 3 days and 3 nights. There's no bending of his word. There's no changing of his word. There's no approximation. The way the church has taught it and the way the Catholic Church established this nonsense so they can have their Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Humans are absolutely outrageous. Just the thought of it is ridiculous. Yahusha was arrested, tortured, crucified, death occurred all on Passover. His placement in the Sepulcher was on Passover, 3 and 6 p.m. Why is that important? Because Yahusha must now rise within the same window to satisfy the sign he said he gave us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions or asks?
I think we're good.
All right. Let's continue. All right. What day and time was Yahusha's resurrection? That's what we're about to talk about now. Who was going to read other than Minister White? Who was the next person?
Brother Isaac.
I can read.
Me.
Oh, I heard the voice of Sister Sarah.
It was Brother Isaac. And then Sister Sarah.
Yeah,
Oh, Brother Isaac, go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. Mark 16, 1-4. And when the Shabbat was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome had bought sweet spices, that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. And they said among themselves, Who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? And when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great.
Thank you, brother. All right, we're going to start looking at some words, and we're going to have a lot of probably time in this little section because there's some stuff here that the translations hid, and it's great to really break it down. Early in the morning, pro-eve, is at dawn or daybreak, and it also says the fourth watch. I'll show you what that means in one of my diagrams coming up next. So Mary and Mary arrived after the weekly Shabbat. How do we know that? Because remember, he died on Passover and was put in the sepulcher before the high Shabbat. If he stays 3 days and 3 nights, he could not have rose on the high Shabbat. So by default, automatically, this is the weekly Shabbat. Okay? And they waited till it ended. Okay? When the ladies arrived during the fourth watch, Yahusha was already resurrected. He was gone when they arrived. So just to give you an idea what fourth watch means, I'm going to just show you so you can see how it's counted. Very simple. Again, it starts at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. Each watch is 3 hours, so we call them quarters, right? We call them quarters, but they're watches. The first watch is between 6 and 9, second 9 and 12, 12 and 3, and 3 and 6 is the fourth watch. You have these watches for the day light cycle of a day and the night cycle of the day. All right, does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So understanding this, can we prove he resurrected on the Shabbat? Yes, we can. Before we go further, are there any questions or asks? All right. All right. Proving Yahusha rose on the Shabbat. I'll read this. It's nice and simple, but this is a big verse. Mark 16:9. Now, when Yahusha was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. Major verse by the church saying, see, this proves he rose early on Sunday, the first day of the week. I have a question. It's the question below. I could move one character in this verse that will change its meaning. Can anybody on the call guess the character?
When you say character, you mean actual alphabet? One alphabet.
It could be anything in there. You're not getting anything in there.
How about the day? Day?
Say that one more time.
Day?
No, ma'am. Anybody else want to guess?
First, his name is italicized.
It is, but I said character. Any character. That's including letters and all. What character do you think I can move?
The comma?
The comma.
Yes. Yes. Watch. Watch how it changes. Restated. Now, when Yahusha was risen, comma, early the first day of the week he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. Did that change the meaning for you all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, believe it or not, Greek has no commas. Who decided to place them there? The translators, because the Western Church wants you to believe he rose on a Sunday, so they can have the Easter Sunday and have the justification of worshiping on Sunday solely as if it's a Sabbath. But with one move of the comma, it now states when Yahusha was risen early Sunday, he appeared to Magdalene. So some in the audience will say, well, Drew, this is conjecture. Now, y'all know I don't like conjecture. Or this is my eschatology. Fancy word. My reasoning and understanding of the verses. No, I'm going to prove to you that's not the case. Does anybody have any questions before we go into a deep dive with ChatGPT?
I would like to say that it's also commercialism, making sure that their Easter stays on a Sunday, and that they try to make it look like he was resurrected on that Sunday because of the month of candy and Easter eggs. You'd be surprised how much money that be bringing on that Sunday. Some money.
Yeah. Capitalism. Capitalism, yes, ma'am.
It also
form of economic. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, brother, please.
I ain't saying I was going to rant, but go right ahead, miss.
I was going to say it also solidifies their stance on that worship is moved to the first day of the week because they say it's the Lord's day. It's the day he is risen. Therefore, we worship on the first day, on Sunday. It was changed at the resurrection. So that's another reason why they want it to be Sunday.
Yep, very much so. And if you talk to anybody in the church, they'll tell you this. This is not a hidden truth. They will tell you that they worship on Sunday because he rose on Sunday.
Exactly.
Yep. All right. Anybody else?
Yes, Brother Drew. I just thought about something when where this is AT&T lingo. If it wasn't written, it didn't happen.
Boy,
So meaning,
yeah, they all get fired if this was AT&T.
exactly. It wasn't written that the Lord's Day was on Sunday. So how can you say that? All these things, if it's not.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And Brother Andrew, I'm going to add some law into it, some man's law. Remember, possession is 9/10 of the law, and it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And they prove it. They changed the scriptures right here. So they believe they possess the knowledge, stating that, oh, we got it. We can prove it. Look, right here. That's why they peddle the KJV all around the globe. Thank you.
Yeah, and people don't know history, but the church wouldn't let you translate it because they wanted to control the translation. They would kill you. They would call you a martyr and burn you at the stake. All right, so let's do some deep dive. Let's examine these highlighted words. Was risen comes in the Greek as anistemi, arise, lift up, and raise up. And we know Greek is very ambiguous. My problem is, do we know how this word is being used? No. Can we believe what translators have translated this word correctly, if they did or not? No. One of the great things about ChatGPT is that it's great with languages. Absolutely great. And it knows how to treat the language as if it was a linguist. So let's have a chat with ChatGPT to see what it says about this word. So I asked ChatGPT, I gave it the Greek word, and I said, can you define this Greek word for me? That's all I asked it. It said anastas, transliterated, right? And the root verb is anistemi. The part of speech, it gets fancy here, I apologize. It's called an aorist active participle, masculine, nominative, singular, male, one, all right, male in reference to one. And the real meaning of this word, not was risen, past tense, having risen, prior tense, right? After rising.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't this line up with the comma change we just spoke of?
Mm-hmm.
It does, doesn't it? It does. But let me tell you what aorist is. An aorist participle is a action, all right, that takes place before the main action or main verb of this sentence. So what is the main verb? It's Yahusha appearing before Magdalene. What happened before he appeared to Mary Magdalene? He rose. So this word was risen isn't correct. It should say now when Yahusha has risen, or after rising Yahusha, early the first day of the week, appeared to Mary. So this is a word or action that occurred before the main verb or action of the sentence, which was his appearing, right? Everybody follow me?
Yes.
So understanding this Greek term, this is some of the Greek terminology in studying the language of Greek. This is one of the words that are used, phrases are used to describe the properties of these words. And the word anasta or nistemi is an aorist active participle, which tells you that this word is an action that took place before the main verb. All right, and it normally describes some type of noun, or it acts like an adjective, or a pronoun or an adjective, right? And a nominative noun is the noun that is doing something and it's masculine, and it's singular, not plural. So this noun is nominative. Yahusha is the noun. It's nominative. What is he doing? He's going to appear, but what has he already done? He's rose already. Does this make sense?
Even just looking at the word, I mean, even if we didn't have ChatGPT, they wouldn't be able to argue it because the word was is past tense. All this just gives you more fire,
They will
more
say it was
firewood.
past tense on Sunday, or it was past tense before Mary Magdalene showed up that Sunday. They have some funky twisting, minister, like they normally do. So I like to dive to make sure I eliminate the argument because ChatGPT says a little more about this.
Okay.
All right. And it literally says that this was his state prior to him showing himself to Mary, or prior to the day, or prior to that moment, it said. The ChatGPT has some more. Any questions?
No,
Okay.
we're good.
Now, one of the challenges you have with ChatGPT is that it's educated. It's a large language model, generative AI. Okay? That means that it learns from those who input. And it's a large language model, meaning it has a lot it can pull from. The majority of its resource is Christian theology when we're talking about this topic. So it has a Christian bias. So to remove the Christian bias, I told it to stop taking in reference religious text, religious bias that's not in the Bible, because it kept telling me he did not rise on Shabbat, he rose on Sunday, because they counted partial days according to Jewish reckoning, which we went over in part 1. I told him that could not be the case, and I showed it in the scripture, but I did not want to add it to lesson, the whole debate I had with ChatGPT. And instead, I simply told it, leaving out the religious theory, going by the text only and what the Messiah said only. If Jesus stayed 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb and he was seen on Sunday morning, Passover would be on Wednesday. And I said, yes or no? ChatGPT said, yes. If you interpret 3 days and 3 nights as a literal 72 hours, and he rose early on a Sunday morning, Passover would have had to fall on Wednesday. Notice he did not want to give up Sunday. He just said that Passover was a Wednesday. How would you count 3 days from Wednesday and get Sunday? It's not correct because he has a bias. It's literally like talking to a Christian, but he deals with logic much better than a Christian. This thing deals with logic. So I asked this follow-up question so I can get rid of that Sunday nonsense. And I asked a question. I didn't say get rid of it. I said, if he was buried on Wednesday and he spent 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb and then rose, he couldn't have rose on Sunday. He would have rose on Saturday evening. Yes or no? Yes, that's correct. So it corrected itself. If Yahusha, I just gave you word for word what it said. If Yahusha was buried Wednesday before sunset, and he remained in the tomb full 3 days and 3 nights, then he would have risen late on Saturday, just before sunset. That's word for word the response it gave. Word for word. So when the facts are plain and there is no religious dogma and lies inputted, it's impossible to do 3 days and 3 nights and land on Sunday. It's impossible. We know he could not have landed on Sunday because he was gone when they arrived Sunday morning. And we know that if he died Wednesday, and we know that that Wednesday was late in the evening, then you do 3 days, it wouldn't have been Sunday. And we know it had to be a Sabbath that he rose, because we know the time of day he rose. It was before sunset. Why? Because he died before sunset. If he would have went too soon, he would have been alive. If he would have went too late, he would have been alive. So we know that he died during the evening of Shabbat before sunset. Does that make sense? Any questions?
Yes. No.
All right, let's continue. I wasn't done. I wanted to ask ChatGPT a little more. So I said, understanding our previous question, Mark 16:9 does not mean that Yahusha rose on Sunday, yes or no? It said yes. If we follow the literal 3 days and 3 nights understanding, if Yahusha was crucified on Passover and remained in the tomb a full 72 hours, then he would have risen late on Shabbat, Saturday evening, not on Sunday morning. That's what it said. That's word for word. So ChatGPT, making sure it don't pay attention to the dogma and religious rhetoric, had to agree that taking what Yahusha said literally, which we're supposed to, he don't joke around and do approximations. And according to Mark 16:9, Mark 15:42, John 19:31, ChatGPT agreed that there were 2 Shabbats, not one. All right? So ChatGPT had one more thing to say. Are we ready? Anybody got questions or adds?
No.
All right, let's continue. All right, see the aorist participle and the main verb? So the participle appears before the main action of the sentence, just like we were saying. Okay? I asked ChatGPT the following. Can you help me understand the Greek word anasthema was risen in English? It says anasthema is an aorist participle, right? The action often that takes place before the action of the main verb. So grammatically, it says Yahusha resurrection happened before the early morning appearance. Before. But because Mark used the aorist participle instead, it means having risen at some point prior. He appeared early on the first day. You see how I paused? Having risen at some point prior, he appeared early on the first day. So the grammar suggests that by the time dawn arrived on the first day, Yahusha had already risen. So we could restate it, now having risen prior or already, early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. All right? Any questions on that one? Or adds?
Will you be going over Matthew 28, verse 1?
No. Yes, next screen. Yep, next screen, I'm sorry. Hey, he did the right thing, though, brother. He did the right thing. Anybody have anything else? Because I think we can finish this up if we continue. We might run a little longer tonight, but it'll be best if we run over a little bit because we can finish tonight and the lesson will be complete. So, proving Yahusha rose on the Shabbat. Let's examine Matthew 28, 1-6. Brother Gianni, go ahead and read this for me.
In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulcher. And behold, There was a great earthquake, for the angel of Yahuwah descended from heaven, and came and rolled back the stone from the door, and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake, and became as dead men. And the angel answered and said unto the woman, Fear ye not, for I know that ye seek Yahusha, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where Adonai lay.
Mm-hmm.
See, I thought he was an approximation. I thought it was just a partial day, a whole day, and another partial day. This angel, this messenger just said he is not here, for he is risen as he said he was going to. What was he said? What was said? I will stay 3 days and 3 nights, then rise. So by reading this, what days of the week are being detailed here? And how would you know? How would you know? Let's continue on the next slide. We'll add a few more bullets. The end of Shabbat, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week. There's Brother Gianni's point. So we now know that this Shabbat was the weekly Shabbat beginning at sunset Friday. Now we know that there had to have been 2 Shabbats, because the first Shabbat was the high feast day.
Mm-hmm.
The second Shabbat was the weekly. So this Shabbat obviously differs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when this Shabbat ended, it was the next beginning of the next week. The other Shabbat, which was the high Shabbat, that was not the case. That was not the case. So these verses help us prove that there was 2 Shabbats, a high Shabbat and the weekly. So the church has it wrong. All right, any questions? All right, let's continue. All right. So Yahusha's resurrection window on weekly Shabbat. Okay? Yahusha stated he would be in the sepulcher 3 days and 3 nights. Yahusha was arrested on Passover. That was Matthew 27. And Yahusha was crucified on the third hour on Passover, Mark 15:25. Yahusha died on the Passover at the 9th hour, Matthew 27:45-50. Yahusha was placed in the sepulcher after his death, before 6 p.m. on Passover, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Yahusha's resurrection was on Shabbat, late evening, before sunset, which would have satisfied the 3 days, 3 nights window. And if Yahusha died during the 4th watch, look at the window time, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Rising during the same window, he was placed in the sepulcher. All right, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions?
I have a comment. This diagram that you're
Yes,
displaying
ma'am.
here, this diagram proves that had he risen on Sunday, he would have been in the grave 4 days and 3 nights, which would have exceeded the timeline that he gave, that he prophesied, that Yahusha prophesied.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's absolutely right. Any other questions? All right, let's go. We just got a couple more slides left. So the Catholic Church, and thus all Christianity, believe that Yahusha spent approximately 3 days in the sepulcher, which satisfies historical Jewish counting of days, meaning If a part of a day was involved, the entire day is counted, including the night. Right? Thus, the church argues a partial Friday crucifixion and burial, a full Saturday and a partial Sunday resurrection, 2 partial days, 1 full day, making 3 full days according to historical counting, or Jewish reckoning, they call it. However, and it's funny, they'll use Jewish reckoning for their resurrection, but they don't want nothing to do with Jews when it comes to the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
They throw out the Jewish law, as they call it, the Mosaic law, all the stuff that's been Jews. The Jews are no longer the people. The church is replacing them. But you can count like them to satisfy your lies. However, why would this be wrong immediately? Because we know that Yahusha died before the high Shabbat, not the weekly Shabbat. Thus, by default, he didn't die on a Friday. And then we just shown in Matthew that he appeared on the first day of the week after resurrecting, right? So we know that he resurrected on a Shabbat, a regular Shabbat. So you have 2 Shabbats here. So the church, to argue a partial day, they used the following verses. All right? This is one of the, and they only used 2 from our knowledge, but they tried to use this one, which is Esther 4:16 through verse 1 of chapter 5. So let's look at these and read it real quick. We'll go through it. It's real simple, straightforward. It says the church will use these following verses to say that the Hebrews did not practice full days. Sometimes they just go by partial days. And they were trying to claim it through Esther's fasting. This is when she was going to the king to see the king, and after what she heard, she wanted to fast 3 days and 3 nights. Go, gather together all the Yahudim that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. Why would she be that specific if all she wanted was an approximation?
Mm-hmm.
Then she says, I also, and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king. Meaning, in that condition, will I go in unto the king. Which, by the way, is not according to the law for me to just appear in front of the king. Because why? Because I can perish. And if I perish, I perish. She says it like that. That's how determined she was. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. They're saying, see, she finished her fast early. She didn't even do 3 nights. She just did 3 days. So it really was an approximation. You see the twisting?
Yes.
Does it say anywhere she ended the fast?
No.
Does it say anywhere that she didn't appear to him fasting? Didn't she say in the previous verse, in this manner will I appear to him?
Mm-hmm.
She appeared to him in a fasting manner. She went 3 days and 3 nights fasting. She didn't say she was going to wait 3 days and 3 nights to appear in front of the king. That timeline was related to her fast. And she did it in that condition she appeared. Does that make sense? So if you ever deal with anybody that tries to say partial day counting and they use this verse, don't let them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any questions? We got. Let me see. 2 more slides, and you'll get a big graphic summary of the whole counting that you all can take pictures and screenshots to use for later. Finally, I got further details on this verse 16 by ChatGPT, and this is what it says. The key phrase, and so will I go in, means in this condition, in this manner. It describes the spiritual state in which she will act, still within the fasting posture. It says nothing in the grammar turns it into afterward or once the fast has ended. It continues. On the third day, Esther put on. This time marker simply locates when she went to the king. It does not redefine the length of a day. It shows that her appearance took place while the third day of fasting was underway. ChatGPT was told by the Christian that this verse was, in fact, support for a shortened approximation date. But when we talked about it, it admitted that it could not be used that way. It's important that we understand where such misteachings come from, right? Okay. Defining a full day. When people want to say the days are partial, Genesis 1:5, and Elohim called the light day and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And in some translations, it'll say day one. So it takes both to have one day, not a piece. Not a piece. That is a lie. And if it's a lie that they associated Jews, it ain't the Hebrew, it's the Jews. It's the imposters, not the truth. You need both. In John 11:9, Yahusha answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light in this world. Well, some will argue and say this means 12 hours only in a day. And we'll quote this verse. But think about it. He wasn't talking about 12 hours in a day. He was talking about a man walks in the daylight so he can see. Because at night he won't be able to see and he will stumble. So Yahusha was proving that there's two parts to a day in this verse. All right. The next slide is the last slide, and it puts it all together. Any questions? Okay. Let's go over this final slide. This is the summation of everything. Putting it all together, counting backwards. We have going to the right, all the way to the right, you have Saturday, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. That is March 16, 1 through 4, 9. Yahusha rose during this window of time to match his time of death. Now you count back 3. Saturday, 3 to 6. Friday, 3 to 6 is 1. Friday, 3 to 6. Thursday, 3 to 6 is 2. Thursday, 3 to 6. Wednesday, 3 to 6 is 3 days. You can't get any other result. All right? You see, between Wednesday and Thursday is the end of Passover, beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread at sunset. So we know he was buried or put in the sepulcher before the Passover ended. And you know that John 19:31, Yahusha was placed in the sepulcher before that time. And Matthew 17, 27, 45 through 50, Yahusha died 3 p.m. So you got to understand, Tuesday ends, Wednesday begins at sunset. That night was the beginning of Passover, and where everything began. Everything began that night. The meal, the going to prayer, the arrest, the beating and torture, the crucifixion, all happened from all that night up till what time? The third hour, which is 9 a.m. His crucifixion. Then the next 6 hours, he died at the ninth hour, and then he was resurrected. Put in the tomb 3 to 6 p.m. on Pesach. All right. Any questions about this? Go ahead, brother.
I will say, I'll make it quick. Regarding the last slide on the 12 hours in the day, notice it said in the day and not in a day. And second, this lets me know that they do not understand how the spring equinox works, because it's not always going to be 9 and 9 hours in the day versus light and darkness. It's always going to fluctuate. And Enoch talks about this as well. It's going to differ. And that's just lack of knowledge right there. If you think it stays the same throughout the whole entire year, it's going to differ. And especially within the land of Israel, around the March and April time, and which is around Passover, there's usually 11 and 12 hours within a day of daylight.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry. Yes, I agree, brother. Anybody else?
Yes, I was gonna comment about what Minister White said earlier when she's saying that he rose on Saturday after Shabbat, and if he didn't, it would have counted what he said because they said he rose on Sunday. That's why it's Sunday. Well, if you look at 1 Peter 2:22, it says he committed no sin and no deceit was found in his mouth. He already said he did not tell a lie. So what you're trying to say, the Christian church is trying to say, is that our Father is inaccurate, bipolar, and he changes his mind after he says a word. After he gives a commandment, he changes his mind, and I'm gonna give the Catholic Church the power to change my word as being the vicar to stand in for him. No, 1 Peter already said that the Messiah committed no sin. He had no bile on his lips. That means bile means no deceit. That means he didn't lie. He didn't have a wicked tongue. All his communication was therefore holy. So when he said something, it was word, it was law. So I'll just tell you what Minister White said about that. I wanted to say it a minute ago, but I wanted you to carry on. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? We'll end it here. We ran a little long. I appreciate you hanging in there, but we were so close to the end. This lesson moved a little quicker than I thought, so I appreciate that. It's nice to people be able to follow. I tried not to make this too complicated, but I think it's important for us to understand how to approach this. So when people speak to you about it, you can talk to it logically and proficiently. All right? So we thank you for joining the House of Shiloh Ministries with Debunking the Sunday Resurrection, a simple two-part lesson speaking on the death and resurrection of our Messiah. Please join us once again where we continue in our series next week on the Hebrew series that we've been working on for quite some time. So please join House of Shiloh next week as we continue in that. Shalom, everyone.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Shalom.